Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
Okay, my guest on today's episode of For Love and Money is a woman after my own heart. Carolyn Tate is a purpose and storytelling expert. She's author of multiple books, an inspirational speaker, and a highly respected leader of the purpose movement in Australia. In 2010, Carolyn came to the crashing realization that her career was at a dead end. After 20 years in banking and 10 years in her own marketing consultancy, her work was no longer meaningful. So she closed the business and took a writing sabbatical in Aix-en-Provence in France with her son Billy. It was the beginning of her search for a new livelihood, and it led to her discovering her twin passions for writing and teaching. 10 years on, she's published 5 books, including The Purpose Project and Conscious Marketing, and she has taught more than 10,000 people on the power of purpose and story. Her own purpose is to help you bring your purpose to life, so together we can build a better world. When she's not working, Carolyn's a dedicated community builder and committed Birrarung, I hope I pronounced that right, Yarra river swimmer. And the Purpose Project is a trusted guide to thousands of leaders, and her focus is on working with school and corporate leadership teams. Carolyn, welcome to the For Love and Money podcast. I'm really excited to get into this interview with you.
Oh, thank you for the invitation, Carolyn. I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. So I'm going to kick off with the first question, which I ask all of our guests, and that is, what does purpose mean to you? And I'd love you to share with us your thoughts on the role of love in business.
Right. Well, that's kind of a double-barreled question. So I'll deal with the first half, which is about purpose. So purpose to me is about accomplishing something that's meaningful to you and of consequence to the world beyond yourself. So it's about something that fulfills your talents, your passions, your skills, the things that you're good at, and then you combine that with doing something that has a positive impact on humanity or our dear, dear Mother Earth. So that's what I think of what purpose means to me. It's quite a practical definition. It's not something that's really floaty and aspirational. It's grounded in practical reality, which is doing something that's meaningful to you and of consequence to others.
Brilliant.
And I love Rumi. He's the great Persian poet and scholar. And he said that everyone has been made for some particular work. And the desire for that work has been put in every heart.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I think it's what purpose is to me in terms of work. It's about finding and doing work that you just have to do. And I talk about it as being a vocation versus a profession.
Yeah.
So a vocation is a calling, whereas a profession is probably more of a career, or it perhaps isn't necessarily always something you're truly passionate about.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because everyone thinks about their career, but not necessarily their vocation, and that touches on something I think we're going to talk about in this interview, which is education and educating the younger generation.
Yes, yeah, that is something I'm really passionate about, and we can talk about that a bit later. And now to the second part of your question, which I think you're particularly excited by, which is love. Well, obviously love is our ultimate purpose. You know, it's the only thing that really matters in any arena. And your question was around love in business. And I think it matters in any arena, whether it's in families, in partnerships, in big business, in government, where whatever. I think the most powerful institutions of the world are actually built on fear. You know, religion, government, media, corporations, and it feels like we're all living in fear more than ever right now, sadly. And fear is actually the opposite of love. And business leaders, I think, who don't embrace the concept of love in the workplace can only really be leading from a place of fear, which is never going to be a way to build a powerful, profitable, and also passionate business that fulfills something beyond making a profit.
That's so interesting that you talk about that. I can't remember. I think it might have been Oprah Winfrey who said everything we do ultimately comes from a place of either love or fear.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Obviously, there are lots of different motivations and drivers, but you can source them all back to those two very, very powerful emotions. And it makes me wonder, you just said the most powerful institutions in the world are based on fear. I wonder, I wonder if that was a conscious decision to do that for government, religion, business, or whether it's been an accidental evolution of the institutions. Big question, right? Do you have it?
I don't want to get into conspiracy theories and sort of, anti-capitalist sentiments and anti-patriarchal sentiments, even though I probably am all those things. I think that fear is a controlling mechanism. The more fearful people are, then the less people will be self-determined and self-directed. And so, if you think about patriarchal systems, capitalist systems, institutions, that they're not really set up to be run from a aspect of love or in the concept of community. Communities are very ungovernable kind of fluid sort of organisms. And so, I'm a passionate community builder, and I'm very passionate about the power of community, which happens from the grassroots up, right? And so they're not controllable concepts, whereas in a capitalist world, it's a very controllable concept because you have to make a profit, you have to meet shareholders' demands, every stakeholder has its place. And unfortunately, the majority of the stakeholders are decimated in the process of bringing, a business or a company to life. And that's the problem, I think. And control happens. Fear and control are kind of bed partners in that way. So leaders who get that love conquers all, we've seen that with Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Nelson Mandela and big leaders of the world that haven't used fear as a way to control. They have come from love, and you can see that they've made a greater impact than many institutions might make. Anyway, I'll stop there.
No, that's interesting, and I think let's just maybe contextualize capitalism. We're talking about shareholder capitalism here because there are other forms of capitalism. It's not that capitalism itself is bad.
No.
It is that particularly shareholder capitalism which has really disenfranchised or just focused solely on shareholder return and profit as the core driver. And
look, I believe in a free market, but the other side of capitalism is consumerism, right? As we're taught that we need to have the best car and the biggest house and all of those sorts of things. So it's a very, very big conversation, and I believe that capitalism is good when it's done with love.
Put very, very simply, and it's funny, we're talking consumerism and we're two ex-marketers here talking about consumerism, but I guess we've seen the dark side of an industry that isn't all dark, but can be used very much for manipulation, not necessarily for the kind of outcomes that you and I are invested in, and a lot more people are becoming more invested in as well. Okay, so great start, really interesting topics already. But tell me about you. Tell me about your background. I'd love to know how you have landed here where you are today, and I'd love you to share some of your journey.
Well, oh gosh, so you started by introducing me with my little story of falling out of love with marketing and banking. So, I did have 20 years in banking and 10 years as a marketer. And I had this pivotal moment where I was sitting with a client at a table, my dining room table, actually. I used to bring all my clients to my home. It was my kind of home office, and I was helping her write a marketing plan for a product that I had no interest in and that I just thought would end up in landfill. And I had one of these moments going, what am I doing? I'm not really even enjoying marketing anymore, and I don't really believe in the product that she's selling. And I just don't want to be doing this anymore. So I had this kind of epiphany, like we all do.
How long ago was this?
This was in 2010.
Okay.
So 10 years ago. And not long after that, I closed my business, sold my house, and went and lived overseas in France, as you said in the introduction. And I wrote my third book called Unstuck in Provence. And it was kind of like it was a travel memoir. It wasn't really a self-help kind of biography of my life. It was a snapshot of from the moment I made the decision to the time I went to France and came home. And that was a pivotal moment for me to think about, well, what do I really want to do for the rest of my working life? And that led me to exploring training and writing more books. And I wanted to be a teacher as a kid. That quote I shared by Rumi was exactly I did. I was born to be a teacher, and it wasn't until 10 years ago that I decided that I would start to teach and writing. So kind of a twin purpose of writing and teaching together.
Before you go on, can I just go back, because you talked about when you were in France, it gave you that time. You'd had the epiphany. You were in France. It gave you that time to really reflect and think about what you wanted to do. Do you think physically being in France enabled you to do that? Or, what was it that helped you go from epiphany, I don't want to do this, to I know what I want to do?
Well, I talk about purpose being a practice, and we don't find it, we actually build it. And so it was that opportunity to step out of a career trajectory, which I thought was going to be marketing forever, and it was like everyone uses the word pivot. It was kind of like a circuit breaker, which is probably a better word for it, because I wasn't going to throw away all my skills and talents and the things that I've acquired from my banking and marketing career. It was about repurposing those skills and those things that I was good at for something new. And so the time in France was, I'm not going to work, I'm going to write. I had a project. I'm one of those people that I couldn't just turn up to France for 6 months and dilly-dally around and go and look at castles and cathedrals and do shopping and stuff. I'm not a dilly-dallyer. I'm kind of one of those people that has to have a project. And so I had set myself a project to write a book. And I lived very minimally with my son. He was 12 at the time, and he went to an international bilingual school, which was about 10 kilometres or 10 miles outside of where we were living, the town of Aix-en-Provence. And I just wrote every day. And I had a goal to finish a manuscript by the time that I left, and I did. And so I'm not sure if that's even answering your question, but it was this time to do something completely outside of my normal life that I had in Sydney, which was marketing and running, project plans and teaching people marketing specifically. And so it was a complete circuit breaker from my past life, I guess, in terms of my work.
So that would do it. Like that circuit breaker gives you time to think, and then on top of that, writing a book, which that you must delve into. So someone described book writing as the best self-development program you can ever do, and I think they're absolutely right. But so what a great way to do it.
Yeah. And the other best self-development is starting your own business too. it was only the beginning. It wasn't like, okay, now it's done, I'm set, and I don't need to do anything else. Like, it was the beginning of lots of different projects that I took on. I wrote a couple more books, and I did teaching, and I started led the conscious capitalism movement for 3 years in Victoria here, and grew that community. I became a member of B Corp for 7 years and got involved in that community. I started a business school called the Slow School of Business because I was very fascinated by the slow philosophy. That lasted for 4 years, and I had 3,000 people come through that school, and
yeah, wow,
I don't know
amazing.
how many hundreds of dinners and classes, and it was a really new way of learning. We'd have these things called deep dinners where we'd get 12 people around a table, and we'd put a topic on the table, and everyone would share what they knew about it. So it was a very different way of learning.
Fantastic.
So I tried a lot of things, and that's what eventually led me to teaching purpose and storytelling. Was through experience and through learning, and so projects. I think purpose is a practice, as I've said, and so every single time I wrote a book, or every time I taught a class, was really a reaffirmation that I was on the right path.
I really like the way you frame it, that purpose is a practice. I talk a lot. I agree with you 100%, and I talk a lot about, purpose is nothing without actions. If it's not inspiring action, then you've got to really reconsider whether it is truly a higher purpose for your organisation. And I guess it takes me to what I see a lot of businesses in Australia seem to be doing, and probably beyond Australia as well, where they go, oh yes, we've got to have a purpose statement, and they get around a table and they get Simon Sinek's Golden Circle out, and they rehash the Apple model, which was great for its time.
Yeah, we've moved on from there.
Context is everything, and that Apple example it's not fit for purpose anymore.
No.
But this idea that we've got to contextualize the business we're in, that's our purpose statement. And once they do that, that's job done, box ticked, and back they go to business as usual. It's just
it's a marketing ploy. It becomes a marketing ploy.
Totally, and it's empty, and sadly they miss out on all the wonderful opportunities that come with connecting to a different driver of their business impact and success.
Yeah, and I think that consumers today, and I hate that word consumers, I think citizens expect companies to have a higher purpose than profit, which is about a human first purpose or a planet first purpose. That I think that companies who don't have a human and planet first purpose are not going to have future, and that there's going to be a struggle for those companies and leaders who aren't able to kind of turn the ship around towards that kind of purpose.
And what brought you to that realization, Carolyn? I mean, I understand, you've shared with us that journey that you've been on from your personal purpose, but understanding, getting that bigger picture and the opportunity that is there, that has propelled you to do what you do today.
Well, there was a catalyst for me. I came back from France, and I started working at a not-for-profit for a while, and at the same time I was running my business. I kind of relit my business up, it reignited it is the word, not relit. I reignited my business, but I also read a book called Firms of Endearment, which was a fabulous book written by Raj Sisodia and some other academics about basically how do we drive businesses with a higher purpose than profit. And so then I read that book, and I just had this aha moment of like, wow, this is the purpose of business, to do good. And then doing good, do well, profit from a financial perspective. And so that's what got me involved in conscious capitalism and that movement, which talks about the 4 pillars of higher purpose, conscious culture, conscious leadership, and stakeholder orientation. And I was specifically interested in the purpose piece. But I'm also very interested, and I'm interested in all 4 pillars, but that whole idea of all stakeholders being looked after in the process of delivering products and services to the market, that particularly interested me. That the stakeholders of community, Mother Earth, suppliers, and so it's not just a conversation that exists around employees and customers, which is and shareholders, which are the three core stakeholders that seem to get all the attention. So I was very interested in this sort of stakeholder model where all stakeholders could be prosperous. And I like to use the word prosperity versus profit, because I think profit is a very poor measure of financial success. It's only measures the company's benefit from the company, like profit. It's not really a measure of whether I'm looking after the Mother Earth or community or, those other suppliers who are very often screwed in the process of delivering services to the market. So it's a very interesting idea. So that was kind of a point. Conscious capitalism was very pivotal in me kind of reconsidering how purpose could drive business before profit.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And so this leads us nicely into what you're doing today. So yeah, perhaps you could share that with us.
Okay, so I wrote the Purpose Project in 2017, and it's a handbook for business leaders and employees and anyone who really wants to bring purpose into the workplace. And since I wrote that, I've been doing a lot of work in various organisations. Currently, I'm working with 20 principals and helping them articulate their purpose as a leader of their school. So it's not about school purpose, but it's their role as their role purpose, because I think there's another layer in this that how do we help people identify their role purpose? And role is what you do, whereas purpose is why you do it, right? So, one of those principals of a girls' school, her purpose as a leader is to inspire young women to use their gifts to transform the world. That is beautiful. Her purpose as a principal. Now, that may be similar to the school's purpose, but a leader, unless they can articulate their purpose, can't really lead the organisation's purpose. So that's one level of purpose, which is role purpose. So I do work around that. The other level of purpose I talk about is personal purpose and how employees can bring that to work. So I'm currently writing a story of a woman who works in an energy company who is a project leader, but she's also extremely passionate about health and well-being, and she's started her own blog and her own, everyone refers to it as a side hustle, and I really don't like those terms of side hustle. I think that's kind of diminishing the value of this other project that this girl's working on, right? It's not her side hustle, it's core to her everyday living. She's studied nutrition, she writes blogs, she teaches people about health and well-being as a result of her own personal and her husband's poor health and the journey that they've been on. And so now in that energy company, she actually is an ambassador, and she is bringing her purpose, her company into the energy company. And so now she's a health and wellbeing ambassador, a project leader by day, and also a health and wellbeing advisor ambassador during the day as part of her role. So there's a lot to be said for how we, and I call it BYO purpose. How do we help our people find that thing that they were born to do? Because this woman was not born to be a project leader working in an energy company. She's worked out how to make that role purpose driven, but there's that other layer. Well, how can I bring that other thing into my day job? So I'm very interested about BYO purpose and how you bring that into your job. And then there's organizational purpose. So what is the purpose of the organization? So recently I did some work with a small mutual bank, and working together with their leadership team, we helped them co-create a purpose statement. And their purpose is to unleash what's possible in our communities. And it was so simple, so profound, but every single one of their leadership team and their board had a hand in co-creating that purpose.
Yeah, wonderful.
So I kind of work at 3 levels: organizational purpose, role purpose, and then personal purpose, or BYO purpose. But what I'm really passionate about is how do we help tell the stories that bring that purpose to life. So I think about purpose as the anchor, but then it's the stories that are like life buoys that you throw out to people and get people back on board the ship,
Now I'm going to get you. This is gold, okay? This is gold, and I just want to dig before you get into storytelling, because I know that's so rich as well. But those 3 levels: organizational purpose, role purpose, and BYO purpose. That story you shared about the person in the energy company. Now, is that a story you've shaped, or is that a real life example?
No, it's a real life example. I'm actually writing a blog for her company's approval at the moment.
Oh, brilliant.
So
brilliant.
I worked with her. I delivered a talk to their organization 3 years ago. And as a result of that talk, she had my book and we had a conversation, and she shared with me what she was doing. And I kind of lost contact with her. And then I thought to myself, I wonder what Michelle's doing. I'll just reach out to her. And then all of a sudden she shared how everything had changed in the last 3 years. She's still working at the energy company, and she's bringing her purpose to life. So that's the next evolution of purpose we're going to see, which I think is just, that excites me no end.
I can totally understand why. And you say that's the next evolution of purpose, which I think you're right. But I love to think about it as, the next evolution of business. Because, I don't reckon we're even scratching the surface of the potential of business. Like the potential that business can create in the world, the value that it can create in the world, feels so limited at the moment. And I don't know why it's become that way, but I just think, there's such a bigger game to play for business, and the ripple effect of businesses playing that game for the people inside those businesses, for the citizens they serve, for the people they serve, for everyone. I think there's huge opportunity. And looking at those 3 layers of organizational purpose, role purpose, and BYO purpose, I'm really curious to understand how the person, Michelle, actually managed to bring her BYO purpose into the organization. Was it just her taking the initiative? Like, how do you know how it came to be?
Yeah. Like it was her taking the initiative and looking for the opportunities. And I think that's, you wouldn't want to lose an employee like Michelle if she's so passionate and self-directed in her learning and her capacity to kind of pursue something that's, her purpose outside of work, and for her to then go, well, I love the security of a job. I love where I work. I love my co-workers. I've got all the resources behind me that I need to do a good job. And now I have a ready-made audience for my work, my other work, my health and well-being work. And so it was, and she was seeing her co-workers suffer. So it just makes absolute sense. So Michelle's a very self-driven person. So she was able to speak, to make contact with HR, or people and culture, it is called, and different parts of the organisation, to actually share what she's been doing. And she was just featured in their monthly newsletter with a link to her website. So, they've got 4,000 employees who are all going to get the opportunity to read about her other project that she doesn't have the imperative of making money from. One day it might make her money, but maybe it's enough to be able to provide the employees of the energy company she works for with her tools, advice, and expertise. So
yeah, nice. And it blends it, like you say, you don't like calling it a side hustle. It blends your life and the things that you care about and are passionate about, maybe even love, to be able to bring them into the one place, which it just makes more sense.
Yeah. Well, how many millions would that energy company be spending on external providers for health and well-being? They've probably outsourced, or are investing a lot of money in training and support services for employees. So why it just makes sense to infuse their whole organization with health and well-being, right? So yeah, I think it's a cost saver for companies. There are people in companies who are passionate about the environment. There are people that are passionate about girls and education. There are people that are passionate about gender equality. There are people that are passionate about Indigenous rights. There are people that are passionate about all sorts of causes. Now, why would you leave one tiny department of an organisation to focus on gender and diversity, for example, or diversity and inclusion? It's kind of like, or sustainability for that matter. Like, why make that only the domain of some specialist that has and a small department that's the first department to get cut, right, when the budget goes? So why not find the people who have got the passion, the interest, the nous, and actually empower them to start making change from the ground up? And I think companies are going to start thinking of themselves as communities. They've got to start thinking we are a community. We are not a company, which is a hierarchical, structural, kind of siloed type of thinking. How do we think about our company as a movement?
Yes.
Or as a community? And a movement is something that allows people to cultivate their strengths, their passions, and people opt into, well, I am good a bit with health and well-being, so I'm going to offer that to my community. Or I am good at, God forbid, Excel spreadsheets. So that's my passion. So I'm going to teach anyone who wants to know about Excel spreadsheets how to be great at it, like help people find their thing and help them bring their thing into the workplace. And that's how you start a purpose movement.
Yeah, but as insiders, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you don't use external, suppliers or consultants, but when you have an insider, but when you have an insider who, is invested, who knows their colleagues, who knows how the business runs, they've got all this inside knowledge as well, and they're invested in it.
Yeah.
God, it makes a world of sense. And yet we just know you're going to do this and that's all you're going to do and that's all you're going to bring. It's bizarre when you actually start thinking about it and breaking it down. It's bizarre that is how limited we have created the focus around business.
And I don't know if we're allowed to mention the C word, COVID, on this program.
Go for your life. We're allowed to mention anything.
But the other C word is community, right? And I think COVID has allowed people to some time, perhaps not those with young kids who are homeschooling, but it has allowed people to reconsider what they really love and what they're passionate about and get curious and try new things. And I've started swimming in the Birrarung, as you mentioned, which is the Great Yarra River close to home. And I through COVID, normally I would swim at the local pool, right? And obviously we can't swim in the local pool, so a bunch of us women have started swimming down the Yarra. And as a result of that, we're now thinking about when we get out of lockdown, we're going to do camping trips and visit all the water holes of Victoria. And
that's fabulous.
And, that could become my next book, which I'm passionately thinking about. Right. My next book might just be all
So
about.
you're still writing a book, and now you're thinking about the next book.
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh my
I've
God.
actually got three half finished manuscripts. So I just finished my sixth book, first draft manuscript, 2 weeks ago, and I'm now talking to my editor about that. And that's what
Amazing.
COVID did. It gave me that chance to dedicate myself to writing a book when, like many of us, work kind of dried up a little bit. But yes, I think that for many of us, COVID has put that question in our head of like, if I didn't have to work, or if I wasn't working, what would I do?
Absolutely.
And we've got a chance to be curious. And I think that thing of curiosity, people say you're nuts swimming in the Yarra and it's like 8 degrees. And I didn't know that I loved cold water swimming, but it resets your body. It's a thermostat. It's the mental health ramification or improvements that have come because of that. And then that sparked a whole new passion, which can become my next passion or purpose project or whatever you want to call it. And that's why I talk about this as being projects. Like, purpose is not a set and forget thing that you have once and that you do it for the rest of your life. Is that we can all have various purpose projects. Wild water swimming it's beyond a passion, because I think there's a difference between passion and purpose. Like, I'm passionate about dancing. I love dance, but I'm never going to study it. I'm never going to go and dance around the world and become I'm too old obviously to become anything professional in that sense. But it's a passion, but it's not my purpose. But wild water swimming has become like another purpose. And so that's why I talk about us having purpose projects. It's not one thing, not one set and forget. And that's why part of my purpose is to bring purpose to life. So it's in your living, and it's in the way you live, and it's in the way I live in my community where I live. I live in an intentional community, which is a whole nother podcast topic. So purpose is a way of living. It's not actually a thing necessarily. It's actually having various projects that are very tapped in to your purpose. And which is why I use that Ikigai model, which is quite famous. What are you good at? What do you love? What does the world need? What can you be paid for? And the more we drill around those 4 concepts, the more you find, that your purpose projects will reveal themselves.
And this word you use, projects, the purpose projects, I think what I really like about it is projects are all about action. Like, when you do a project, it can't be passive.
Yes.
There's got to be action behind it. And it fits really nicely. Now, I interrupted you before. You're about to get into storytelling, which I'm really keen to explore with you. So can you pick up that thread, or shall I? You were talking about the 3 layers, and then...
Yes, I can pick up that thread of storytelling. I kind of feel like I should tell a story if I'm going to talk about storytelling.
Please.
Would that be okay?
That would be perfect.
And it relates to my wild water swimming. And so I'll just share this story and cut me off if it's too long. But
go for your life.
So just 1 month ago, I was standing at the water's edge of the great Birrarung Yarra River. I was wistfully watching a German Shepherd retrieve a stick from what I believed was a swimming hole unfit for humans. Oh, to be a dog, I'd lamented out loud to the dog's owner. People swim here too now, she shared. There's a group of women swimming most days. I was both astounded and excited, and I raced home, and within seconds of arriving home, I was posting a message on our local Facebook group. Is there anyone out there that knows about these wild, crazy women swimming in the Yarra? And within minutes, I'd received a response. And within days, I'd joined my new tribe, and I was enjoying the water just like that dog. I'd become one of the first members of our local wild water swimming club. Now, I'm going to put a little caveat in here, which I haven't written in this story. And the caveat is that we are doing it COVID safe in pairs. For anyone who's wondering about all of us people gathering, We're not gathering, we're swimming in pairs. We've got a WhatsApp group now of more than 50 people, and it's just growing and growing. So now every morning upon waking, the great Birrarung calls. Nothing gets me out of bed faster than the thought of being immersed in 8-degree water. Like a woman possessed, I ride my bike down to the river to greet a friend before I strip down to my swimsuit and prepare for the plunge. Stepping gleefully down the perfectly cut rocks to the water's edge, I take one further small step into the squelchy mud of the banks and slide in as gracefully as possible. And I'll just put a little caveat in here again. Not that gracefully, I can tell you. My head remains above the water. The cold catches in my throat. I breathe mindfully through the shock. The water is brown yet clean and almost silky against my skin. At first, I'm self-absorbed. I'm focused on my anatomical adaptation as I lose my land legs and morph into a mystical amphibian. In less than a minute, my body is acclimatized. I forget myself and turn my attention outwards to my surroundings. And then my story goes on. I'll cut it off there because I could go on for it's a whole chapter.
I could listen for hours. That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, and so then I could just go on to talk about what it's like to be actually at eye level of the water and look up at the cliffs and so on. And then I talk about how this has turned into a movement now, and that's how movements are started. I reference the wonderful TED talk by Derek Sivers called How to Start a Movement. And it's a 3-minute talk, which I'd encourage you to put in the show notes, Carolyn. And
I will do.
It's all about how it takes one lone nut to start a movement, and how.
Oh, I love that. I've seen that.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
And how the first followers that follow the lone nut make the movement, and that's exactly what's happened with our Yarra river swimming group. We're being very mindful about, I know you're sharing this blog in a few weeks, and hopefully by then we'll be out of lockdown. So we're kind of, in a way, we're being a bit trying to be underground about it. You know, we've had ABC TV wanting to do a story and all sorts of things, but we're kind of trying to keep it underground and allow it to grow as a movement rather than it growing because, there's some big media presence or whatever. And we don't want to have rules and regulations. We're very, very mindful. It's mostly women that have joined the group, but that's the start of the story. And I've probably gone totally off piste. But
no, keep going.
Storytelling.
Yes.
So storytelling is really what brings purpose to life. And I think that if we can tell stories, and I've got a framework of about 11 different types of stories that leaders can tell in business or in schools. Particularly, I'm interested in schools as well. And one of those is a purpose story. So if you are a principal of a school and you articulate your purpose, like the woman that I shared before, like, what is the story that's going to make that believable to an audience? It's one thing to state that my purpose is to help young women, inspire young women to find their gift and transform the world. But it's another thing to share a story of her personal life and how she has found that purpose and her own story, but then to also share the stories of the students that she's worked with that have done that. Because when you start to tell that story, people get on board. They want to be a part of that movement. And without story, you have nothing but stats and facts and a whole list of events that happened. So my real passion is articulate the purpose, but then find a way to share that story, because it's the story that then incites the action so that people will do something. And I use an 8-step framework in a 3-minute purpose story that takes people through 8 different points, that if they're going to tell a story about their purpose, then there's sort of 8 markers to hit.
And so this is storytelling about your personal purpose. So of the 3 purpose levels you've talked about, your BYO purpose, and how it connects to the organizational purpose or your role purpose or whatever. Yeah.
And I think you could have 3 different stories, right? one around your role, one around your BYO purpose, and one around your organizational purpose.
Yeah, I can imagine though, when you connect it to your personal BYO purpose, when it becomes personal, is when people really connect with it.
Yes, definitely. And look, there are companies like Lululemon is a fantastic example, where they have a wonderful global purpose, which is to elevate the world by unleashing the full potential within every one of us. And they also encourage their employees to have their own purpose. And then they teach, through coaching and through storytelling, they teach them how to intersect the personal purpose, with the company purpose. So yeah, there's lots and lots of levels of purpose. I think we can overthink it though. I'm really passionate about getting into the story piece. And I talk about saying your purpose straight, not and then say it great. So like and it's like storytelling. When I teach storytelling, say what you want to say it straight. It doesn't matter how boring the words are. That's what thesauruses are for. And then you actually say it great. But it's get the points out and then say it with more eloquence and compassion, passion and interest. And courage.
Yeah, brilliant. A whole new level of opportunity, I think, for communities to reach. You talk about business communities as movements for change, which I believe they can be, and that's their power. But yeah, I think there's so much opportunity that, like I said before, we're just scratching the surface. And the more we can connect people, individuals, the more we can help individuals connect to their purpose, and organizations connect to, why they're here, and what is that change that they together can use their influence to create in the world. The more meaningful business, work, life becomes for everybody.
And exactly. And it's also about, like, you're going to have a happier home life if you can bring that purpose to work as well. And it's about role modeling it for our kids. I think as a parent, it can be very easy to expect you want your child to be happy, so you want them to follow their purpose, right?
Yes.
But as parents, we don't role model it. So if we're not role modeling it to them, then how can we expect them to do that? So, very often we want, if we're a doctor, we'd love our kids to be a doctor. If we're a lawyer, we want them to be a lawyer. The king's son becomes a king. And, that there's a very, there is a danger that many of us, we want our kids to pursue their purpose and so on, but we don't want them to be poor. So we kind of still direct them. We kind of equate following your purpose with poverty, which I think is a very antiquated concept, that it's a bit, we've got to think about, well, you're not going to, you can make an income from following your purpose, but most importantly, you're making a contribution to the world, and you're readjusting your values in order to be able to pursue your purpose. And your values may no longer become materialistic. Your values become more long-term human values rather than physical or material values. So there's so many layers to this discussion.
Which is why I think the work you're doing is so vital, because, I think I might have shared this story with you when we were talking. I can't remember, but my daughter she's nearly 23 now, and she finished uni earlier this year, and she had a lot of friends around who, she and everyone else wanted to change the world, they were excited to get into the workplace and do things that were meaningful and create, something that mattered, positive change. And yet I'd hear stories from her, about her friends sometimes where she said, oh, they've been offered a job by, this corporate or that corporate. And the sense I got was that they felt they had to take it, probably because of exactly what you were talking about, that if they followed their heart, that could lead to poverty. Whereas, this was an opportunity to work for this big corporate or big bank or whatever it may be, which they couldn't afford to say no to. And so I think, the work that you're doing in education is so vital.
Can I just make that you mentioned that word poverty, and it just kind of hit me in the heart, because there's more kinds of poverty in the world than financial poverty. There's spiritual poverty, and there's emotional poverty.
Yeah.
And so poverty is a word that we always associate with lack of financial means, but spiritual poverty is far more prevalent because of the pursuit of financial means. So, it's not an either or, it's an and, but that word poverty is so often associated with money, but it's actually a word that can exist in all forms of a human existence.
Yep, absolutely. It's like economics. We think about economics in terms of how well the economy is performing in financial terms, and yet there are movements that talk about economic well-being. And I think, everything traditionally has sort of pushed people down the path of money, make enough money so that you can live well, and business, make enough money. It's all about making money. And like you're absolutely right. There's so much more. And poverty of spirit, poverty of good mental health and well-being. There are so many other things that hit us.
And there is another poverty that is arising, I think, in the Western world, and possibly in Australia since COVID has hit, and that is social poverty. Because a lot of people working in the corporate world or in the business world were going to work every day, and their community was centered around their workplace. And so now that they're working from home, they're finding themselves back at home and that they don't know their community. And so there's a kind of social poverty that's been exacerbated through COVID, and which is one of the reasons that our Yarra swimming hole has become so so many people are interested in it, because many of the women are people that have perhaps are living alone, or have come from a environment in government or in corporations where their community has very much been their workers. Now they're spending all day, a lot of that time, I guess, on Skype, not Skype anymore, Zoom. In virtual meetings, but then the day ends and they've got no one to connect with physically, even for a walk. Because they've not built a social cohesion around them. And so I think there's social poverty that is really a problem, and that's why community is so important, where people live. And that's the shift I think we're going to see, because people won't be going back to work full time, right? And so they will be working more remotely. And so yes, I'm passionate about kind of how you build community around where people live, not so much in workplaces as well.
Yeah. And well, it comes down to connecting people to something they care enough about that gets them outside of their comfort zone.
Yep. Yeah. And I think having a common, community comes from two words, common and unity. So it's about having we are all swimming in the Yarra because we have a common goal for mental health and well-being, and that's going to morph into things like how do we protect the Yarra and a whole lot of things. Whereas other people will have, if they've got children, then their school community is very important, or But often we don't choose our community or create our community. We kind of fall into it a bit like a job, right? So I happen to live in this suburb, and so I happen to be a part of my kids' school community, but I may not necessarily feel that connected to the school community. But so we just kind of rub along with it. So we're not creating community, we're kind of falling into whatever's available. And so there is very much an opportunity for people to create or join communities that are very much aligned with their way of thinking or their passions or purpose. So that's another subject for a whole new podcast.
I think there's a couple of subjects there, and we haven't even got into the work you're doing with women in leadership, and that's something I'm really, really keen to explore with you. But I want to give it the time it deserves. So I would love to invite you to come back and chat again, because that would be fantastic if we could get into that too.
No worries. I'd love to do that. Thanks so much, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you. So before you go away, let me just have a look. I did want to ask you another question, actually a couple of questions before you go. First of all, what are your thoughts on the relationship between profit and purpose in business?
Well, they're the opposite sides of the same coin. But I also think it probably goes back to my point around prosperity, that profit's not necessarily the best measure of success. So there's a conversation to be had with leaders around prosperity as it fits with within all the stakeholders that I was talking about before. So they are both an imperative. Without profit, you don't have a future. Without purpose, you don't have a future. But work on purpose first. Work on purpose and how it aligns and integrates and serves all of your stakeholders. So very often when I talk about a purpose statement, it can't be aimed at a customer. Like, it can't be a customer-driven purpose statement. It has to be able to be inspiring and understandable and practical for all stakeholders. So then how does that purpose then translate into profit, and what impact will it have on all of the areas of an organization, from customer service through to after sales service, through to product development, through to marketing and people and culture, and that there's all of these areas of a business that purpose impacts, and it's the great connector. So if the company purpose is articulated well and it's practical and applicable and people get it and they feel like they own it, then it's the way to break down silos to talk about, and it's the thing that companies can make big decisions on. So I always say to a leader, when you've got your purpose, you then say, is this purpose the decision I'm about to make today going to bring me closer, our company closer to this purpose, or draw us further away from it?
Absolutely.
And if it's going to take them further away from it, then you rethink that choice you're about to make, right? So I think they're both an imperative, and that if companies pay equal attention to both, then they can't go wrong.
Exactly. And without profit, you can't scale the impact you're having in the world.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So final question until our next interview. And that is, again, it's a final question I'm asking every guest. Today, we're in 2021. Mm-hmm. We have 9 years until 2030, which is the target date for the global goals. We are the generation that have the opportunity to act today. Future generations won't have the same opportunity that we have. So our choice on how we act is going to have huge implications for the future, and other generations will inherit that. So I just want to ask you, what's your hope? With that in mind, what is your hope and what is your message to business leaders today who have that opportunity to act?
Well, my message is one of gender equality. It really is. Without gender equality, we won't have a purpose-driven world. We won't be putting humans or Mother Earth first. And that's in the 2040 report, in David Attenborough's one of his recent documentaries, there's more and more and more evidence that equality, true gender equality, is the only thing that is going to drive our world. And when we look at, I'm watching the 9/11 doco at the moment, Turning Point, and you just see war and atrocities throughout the whole thing. And I hate to say it, but they are being created by men, and, there are beautiful men in the world. We want them to lead, but we want beautiful women to lead alongside, and we need to change. That's what we need to fix, is pure gender equality. When that happens, we will have a whole new world. And I urge every woman and every man to really understand what gender equality means. There's intersectional feminism, and there's a whole lot of areas around gender equality, but I kind of feel like, and that's what my next book is aimed at, helping women have a voice and tell their stories. I think that we start with story because it's the greatest level, it's the greatest way to understand each other. But if we don't have gender equality in the world, we will not create the beautiful world that is possible.
So well said. Carolyn Tate, thank you so much for your time, your insight, and your thoughts on this interview. I really look forward to talking to you again very soon. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, and I hope our listeners have as well.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?